Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews, this being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Devils. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we're picking up with after the events of Ed's, suicide, and obviously kind of the ripple effect that's kind of happened in many different regards. Because obviously, like for Massimo, it's a whole situation of, he got passed over by the job that he wanted, and it's like, even though Ed's dead, he still can't get the job he wants. So now it's a situation of him kind of thinking about, it's time for him to leave. I mean, obviously that was a whole conversation beforehand, but Dominic is like, no, kind of don't try not to let him go, because he doesn't want to let, Massimo go. But, so even to the point he talks to his wife, who's consoling Ed's wife, and it's like, I need you to do something for me. I need you to convince Massimo not to do anything crazy. And it's like, why? It's like, you want him to say, he's like, yeah, I want him to do anything. I want to protect him. It's like in his own mind, Dominic thinks he's protecting him. It's like, no, I'm doing what's best for him. But like his wife is like, no, you're like literally incapable of caring about someone else. You just want me to put him in a position so that you can continue to manipulate him. Isn't that what it is? So it's like, she probably feels like more so than anybody, she can see Dominic for who he really is. So that's what the whole thing is. And she even calls up Massimo to let him know like what's going down. Because I was curious like why Massimo was so like ready to like burn that bank to the ground and screw over Dominic, even though they had the relationship they do. I think it's being passed over by the job, but also he knows literally everything is pointing towards him being responsible for Stewart's death. Ed Stewart's death, like whether he did it directly or not, that's not the point. It's just like he's, I think it's to clear his own consciousness of like, I didn't do anything wrong, even though I put him in a position where it's like I jeopardized the big deal he was making, so he ended up killing himself for it, Now his wife is without a husband, their child is without a father, so, and obviously his team is kind of feeling it too, because it's like, they're kind of, even Sophia's like, because of the information you gave us, a man killed himself, and he's like, no, that's not why he did it. If you want to know, why don't you ask his therapist, so, but now he's using this as an opportunity to say, you know what, Sophia, you guys got connections. How about you get me in touch with someone from The Guardian? So she takes it to her boss, Duvall. Who's, talking about, like, basically, like, why he leaked stuff. It's because, the people, like, basically, you got to unveil these secrets because of what people are willing to do behind the scenes to protect their secrets. The fact of the matter is they are kind of like gods that, they look down upon anyone else that's not kind of in that stratosphere, and I thought that was just a kind of an interesting thing. But obviously, like Sophia talking to him, he's like, basically, I guess because of the nature of who he is and what he does, it's like, I can't stay in one spot for too long. I got to keep moving. It's like, yeah, it's not going to be long before like that interview hits the internet and stuff like that. So he's got to, keep moving, I think, before like people can 100% pin him down. But nevertheless, obviously Massimo is doing everything he can because his team is worried about like, okay, so what are we going to do? He's like, basically, I'm going to make sure that you guys get, I'm going to work somewhere else, but I'm going to bring you guys with me. It's like, we have a non-compete clause. He's like, don't worry, I got this. I'm going to handle this. So he ends up talking to another dude, and Lee owns like this, second biggest bank or whatever. And it's like, he's, trying to spend time with Lee to try and, persuade him that, hey, like, because obviously it's like, and it's something that was even said last episode by Dominic. It's like, anyone would take this opportunity to grab Massimo up. He's such a big name and such a, he's such a get that anyone would want to. So even Lee's interested. But when it all came down to it, it's like, you're going to try and burn Dominic to the ground. And he's like, I'm not looking for all that fire. And it's like, but, if you burn, that bank to the ground, any money you have is going to burn with it. He's like, yeah, but basically he needs Lee to kind of be like, yeah, but if I'm letting you know ahead of time that I'm about to leak some information that's going to burn that bank, then you can make a killing off of it, and that could kind of cushion us as well, But the dude, Lee's like, I'm not going to take your team because the way you're stabbing Dominic in the back, who's to say you're not going to do the same thing with me? And I don't want your team to be there to help you stab me in the back. So you and you alone get to come, not the rest of your team. then there's a whole situation, because you can tell the one that's really about to break is Paul, because Paul's stressing, he's up there smoking because he's got like a family to look after and stuff like that. So, but the other dude in the team is like, no, dude, don't worry about it. Massimo's always been there for us. He's always had our back. So, you get to kind of keep living the life you've lived and just kind of believe in Massimo. He's never given us reason to doubt him, So, obviously, Sophia sets up the whole meeting of like, meeting with this person from The Guardian. And it is so interesting, like, why she is so willing to help him, She still never really, I didn't quite get what she said, because it didn't seem like she made it clear on why. Because even Duvall was like, why are you helping him? It's like, I don't know, maybe there's just something about him that she's like, I'm willing to help him. I think she even said like either like because I'm stupid or he's stupid. Or, like she said something of that vein. I'm sure I misheard it, but it was something of that nature. It sounded like, but that still doesn't give us maybe it's something connected to her own past. It like maybe she sees something in Massimo that she wants to help him because of. I don't know. There's also like the whole thing with like Dominic in this episode too, like him going to like those like. I guess they're like meetings of like people from different backgrounds and stuff like that. I guess it's like people from different banks. They're at that one place, and it's like I'm like I said, I'm an idiot to a lot of this stuff. It almost sounded like the dude there was like, we need to make one, almost like let's change the currency, because like the American dollar is one thing, but like almost sounded like he wanted to change European currency to something else, or rather almost bring everything in Europe under it sounded like I said, I'm probably misinterpreting it, but it sounded like he was suggesting bringing all European currency under one currency, kind of like all of the US is under one currency. So like I think that's, and even Dominic's like, oh, isn't that a little extreme? But the dude was kind of like, it's just kind of it's kind of almost like in his mind, it was just kind of like, oh, this is kind of the necessary step with everything that's going down. Just because remember, this is after the big recession in '08. It's only been like a couple years since then at this, in the time frame of the show. So it's like, I guess they're trying to all find ways to kind of battle this situation. And that's one particular way. But obviously Dominic showing up in like Frankfurt and meeting with the dude, and it's like, no. He's like, oh, here's your gift, and it's a dollar bill. And he's like, I don't get it. It's like, United. What was it? It was kind of like basically representing what America is. It's like, oh, America all exists under this $1. So basically, he was like, you set up that situation because you're getting things the way you want. He's like, actually, you're gonna kill that situation because you owe me. And he's like, what? Our situation this doesn't fall under our situation. He's like, oh, yes, it does. He's like, whatever you got to do, you need basically guidance. I want you to look at this dollar, and he's got this like devilish like smile, like it's almost like he's smiling as he's stabbing you in the chest. It's almost that, and he's just twisting a knife because the dude was like, oh, you're doing this on the day of my daughter's wedding. It almost sounded very Godfather like, and it's just like, no, shut up. You're gonna do what I tell you to do. And it's like, that's so interesting, like why Dominic is kind of like feared the way. I guess he's a man with so many he knows where the bodies are buried, he knows where the skeletons are, so I think like a lot of people just kind of have to do what he says, At the same time, like there was that interesting thing where Massimo ends up, I'm a little out of order with everything, but I do apologize, when he went to go see Oliver, and even Oliver's like, like I thought working with you been an opportunity, and now a guy killed himself because of me working. And it's like, no, that dude didn't do it, because like Massimo's tired of like literally everyone. He's trying to clear his own name to find out like why is there like so much everything is kind of almost pointing towards him being responsible. I think it's his own self-guilt, but plus everything else that went down that makes him go like, no, I need to clear my own name in all of this. So he gets Oliver to, go, and Dominic's wife like gets the computer for him to look at Ed's computer. And luckily he gets up there, and obviously the cops are looking into it, and obviously Massimo's name comes up because it's like, partially because of that, my husband was a little stressed about work and stuff like that. It's like, oh, the laptop's gone, it's not here, it must be at work. It's like, oh god, I was like, this is going to complicate things. But Oliver was able to get only a little bit off of the computer. It turns out to be a single file, and it turns out that file has Massimo's name, and it's like, but it's been deleted. But then later on he finds out like, oh, that file was deleted 2 hours after Ed died, and it's like, wait, what? What was that about? Why would he? Because at first I was like, oh, was it a file about all the dirt he had dug up about Massimo? Because remember, Massimo was believing, well, him and his entire squad was thinking like last episode, like if anyone was doing all this against us, it had to be Stewart or Ed, you know? Then there's a whole situation with Paul being cornered by Dominic's dude, and he being like, oh yeah, that girl you were with, yeah, she was 16. This is enough to bury. He's like, no, this ain't enough to really, but it's like, no, spy on Massimo for it, because if you don't, I thought he wasn't going to do it at first. I thought he was going to like be forced into a corner and did not do it, but then like he was like, before the dude even finishes walking away, Paul was like, okay, fine. So and obviously Dominic's learning everything that, you know, Massimo is up to, because Massimo trusts this team and he's telling them everything. Honestly, the moment he brought Oliver there, and I love Oliver's like, because I even love Oliver being like, yo, next time you come by where I live, don't not show up in here, because it's going to draw the wrong attention. He's like, you're going to get me in trouble, because I think it's going to be a thing of like, oh, so you got money now, like you probably want to keep, it's probably that type of neighborhood where it's like you want to keep it low key, because if you don't, like, you're most likely to get robbed, because people think like, oh, you got money now, you know, oh, you big spender, like that might be the implications there. But obviously him enjoying it when Massimo takes him for a ride, it's like, yeah, it's a pretty sweet, you know, ride, and just kind of like, it's a little taste of that lifestyle. But then he gets brought up there, you know, to the higher floors of the bank, and it's just kind of like everything is going down, and Massimo's like, oh, okay, Oliver, what you think? It's like, what? It's like, yeah, either he's going to raise the interest rates, at which will make a huge profit for the next 5 years, or he's going to lower and we're going to lose 50 mil right now. So what are you going to say? And he's like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, leaving it up to him. And, you know, and I was like, oh. And then I was like, Oliver's looking at the TV and stuff like that, and he's reading them. And it's just like he read Davenport last episode, and he's like, oh, he's going to raise them. And luckily it worked out. So I was like, in that moment, I was like, because we know Paul is the, you know, kind of quote unquote rat, I was like, because of that, Paul's out. His new replacement is right there. Massimo doesn't know it yet, but yeah. So that's interesting, though. But in the grand scheme of things, there's also the whole situation with Massimo and him looking after Carrie, because obviously they had to put her into a coma with her situation. And the entire time he's thinking about when they first met, you know. And, you know, obviously he said at the time he was a student. He was studying economics. And she's kind of something of an artist, and it's like we see kind of a little bit of the beginning of their story, but there's still so much in between, like how they got to where they are right now. There's still so much left unsaid in that regard. So it's like, you know, hopefully over the course of the season we still get more to that story, more background, and that regardless of this, I mean, it's sad in the grand scheme of things, because like obviously Massimo is trying to do everything he can to kind of clear his own name, maybe even his own conscience. But rather than showing up to meet with the reporter from The Guardian, he goes and sees Ed's wife. And Ed's wife reveals, like, oh, you basically, everything you did was actually for nothing. My husband had no interest in that job. He was actually going to leave. And Massimo was like, what? She's like, yeah, so keep your apology, because you went that far against the man that didn't even want the job. And he was confused because, lo and behold, who kept feeding him that information? Dominic was like, Dominic's the one that made it into a competition and everything. And he was like, why'd you tell me he wanted the job when he didn't? And it's like, I was trying to protect you. I'm like, I did. I guess because he felt like, you know, if Massimo didn't, I guess the reason why he said that is because at the same time, because Massimo had looked at the paper at the beginning of the episode, and it was like, oh, like Ed had talked about like huge profits, and he was like, what? That didn't make any sense. So he was thinking like Ed was kind of cooking some stuff, you know, kind of cooking the reports. But then like Dominic was like, yeah, keep that shit to yourself. Like don't be saying that loud, and just like keep a lot of that to yourself. But now Massimo was kind of realizing, like, now it's like, okay, he has to, like, because now Dominic knew everything that he was up to. It's just kind of, because he was reading the paper, worried whether he wanted to see whether or not Massimo has leaked any of that information, because any of that information that got leaked from because they were like, yeah, he must have found something on the laptop. It's like they did a pretty good job of clearing it, but they weren't sure. Like, he must have found something. He wanted to talk to a reporter. But obviously Paul wasn't in the room at the time, so he didn't get the information that, like, obviously, like, Dominic ended up inadvertently showing his hand because he didn't realize, like, Massimo didn't find anything. He couldn't do anything because the one file up there with his name on it was deleted. But it's just because Paul wasn't in the room to relay that information, it kind of gave Massimo, in a certain regard, the upper hand. in that regard to an extent. But now it's kind of clear that, like, you know, Ed was cooking the books. He was cooking the records and stuff like that. And it's like, oh yeah, and in the moment we found out he got fired, we allowed the narrative to come out that, like, oh, like he retired, he's quitting. But, you know, because we don't want to, you know, drag his name through the mud, because that's going to drag, you know, his wife and son's name through the mud too. So, like, we did that to save them, to spare them all that. And it's like, so you can only assume that's him covering his ass, because he was probably most likely going to expose them. So part of me wonders, was that file that Massimo, with Massimo's name, despite them being the rivals that they are, he was probably going to send that information to Massimo. He was probably going to, like, mail it to Massimo to be like, yeah, this is what's going down at the bank, because he believed maybe Massimo had enough of a conscience to be the one to kind of do it. You know, maybe that's what that was, maybe it wasn't. Not unless it was something they were planting on his computer to screw over Massimo, but then it's like, oh, we don't need... It had to be something against the bank. That, since they were so worried about, like, oh, what was left on that computer that Massimo might use and, you know, give to the Guardian against us. So it had to be, like, he must have trusted Massimo, which is the whole thing, which is interesting, because, like, them kind of being, like, him saying what he said, maybe that conversation he had with Massimo in the elevator about, like, I was at the bottom and I had to get to, like, maybe something in that, maybe just their back and forth, maybe it put it, like, you know, like, oh, I can, I don't know. So now it's a situation of, you know, he confronts Paul, and Paul's like, they had this stuff against me. What was I supposed to do? He was like, you should have come to me. He's like, all right. So, but obviously Massimo can't, you know, they can't go anywhere. So it's like, all right, you're going to stay here. So I'll, you know, kind of get the slap on the wrist. And he's like, no, you're out. Get out. It's like, yo, don't ever come back. So it's like, once again, we're setting up the fact is Oliver's going to be replacing him. But now he brings in the rest of the team, and it's like, well, what happened? It's like, the fact of the matter is, Massimo's like, I don't think Ed killed himself. So now it's like, obviously, it's looking towards Dominic probably didn't do it himself. You never know. It could have been a situation, because, like, Ed threatened, you know, that business. Threatened, because, you know, it's like, as Duvall was saying about them being gods and what they're willing to do to keep their secrets. When you have this much money, for you, when it comes to that, it's no longer about money, it's about power. And for you, probably your reputation means everything, because if you lose this, it destroys your reputation and you'll never be able to get back in this position again. You'll lose that power. And once you have that taste of power, you never want to give it up. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely, you know. So I doubt Dominic did it himself. Maybe he did. But at the same time, we have that thing at the end where that dude on the new, I think that was the same dude, you know, talking about the currency, like, you know, at that thing Dominic was at. Basically, there is sexual assault allegations against him. I think they were saying, like, his lawyer and his wife are, like, adamant about his innocence. But you're like, Dominic had to set that in motion. You know, willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants. Willing to break, destroy, even potentially kill people to get what he wants. At the same time, Massimo's got to deal with all this. Plus, he finds out Carrie died. They couldn't pull her out of the coma. You know, it's almost interesting because he's like, oh, I'm going to go be with Carrie. It's just so interesting. The moment he said that, sometime later she ends up dying. Not interesting isn't really the right word. That sounds so morbid to say. It's just, the timing just seemed interesting. Like, I know it's not like he had anything with, it's like, oh, he wants to be with her, kill her immediately. It's like, no, it's just sad that the timing of it all. But it's like Massimo kind of has nothing. You know, it's like he got caught up in all the evil of this job and everything. Because even Ed's wife was like, "If do you have kids?" He was like, "No." She's like, "Don't," because basically it will eat away. This job will kind of corrupt that. You will lose everything. It will eat away at your soul. And obviously Massimo's already kind of felt that, the effects of that. But because I'm assuming we'll kind of dive into his background to understand how he got to where he is. Because like I said, the way he talked about it last episode with Ed, like, I started off low, I could only go high. So I believe it's like he had to come from like a rough, like poor background. And it's like once you've been there, you never want to go back. But it's like, to get that far, how much of yourself are you willing to give away? And now Massimo, it's like, you know, the devil has always been there and always will be. You know, God can never beat him, but he's like, I will be the one to beat the devil, you know? So, obviously, you know, in his eyes, Dominic being the one. So it's like, maybe it's going to be about finding out if he was the one responsible for Ed's death and, you know, doing everything he can. He's going to be working at the bank, but he's also going to be planning everything he can to destroy Dominic, you know, because it's like, you are the devil. Like, because it's one thing to kind of screw each other over business-wise and stuff like that, for you to be an actual murderer, and just the fact of the matter is that it's like, because now he believes it wasn't Ed that got the information about Carrie, that it might have been Dominic, considering Dominic's the one that threw it in his face, and he's like, oh yeah, the board found out and stuff like that, but it's like, it was you, wasn't it? Because it was all about probably keeping Massimo like in check, you know, making him what you needed him kind of in your debt, you know. It's like, because he's always been under your wing, and I think it's just a thing of maybe you don't want him to surpass you, whatever the case may be. I'm interested to see, you know, where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.